Spring 1954. War has raged in Vietnam for 7 years. Now the attention of the world's great powers centers on a remote valley called Dien. One of the most historic battles of the 20th century is taking shape. In this jungle arena, the fate of French IndoChina is decided. In 1952, the Communist Viet Minh Army takes over the strategic valley of Dien Bien Phu. The valley dominates supply routes linking Vietnam, Laos, and China. The French commander, General Henri Navarre, decides to occupy Dien Bien Phu in a daring parachute assault.
The purpose of Dien Bien Phu was to defend Laos, and I decided on the Dien Bien Phu entrenched camp because with the state of my forces, which I said were inferior to those of the Viet Minh in terms of mobile forces, the strategy of blocking the road from Laos to Dien Bien Phu was the only one which seemed to be reasonable, and I am still certain that it was the only one.
A French regional commander warns that Dien Bien Phu may become a battalion meat grinder. Now, having taken Dien Bien Phu, the French plan is to pursue the communists in their border sanctuaries. An immediate task is to repair the old airstrip, the only link to the outside. The French land equipment suited to an attack base. They don't envisage a fortification. The communist force, the Viet Minh, has two choices: ignore the French action or attack. Studying his tactical maps, the communist commander General Giap tells his officers, "We will wipe out at all costs the whole enemy force at Dien Bien Phu." Giap is the master strategist throughout the Vietnam conflict.
We had to count every bullet, but we were inspired because we never before had been able to gather such a force. We were optimistic, but there were many difficulties. When Chairman Ho gave me the leadership, we talked all night. He said to me, "Our forces grow stronger day by day, but we must not let the enemy destroy the strength." He asked, "Can you do it?" I thought for a while and answered, "The enemy won't be able to destroy our strength. The difficult thing will be to take the initiative."
6 Viet Minh infantry divisions force march 20 miles a day. They head for a rendezvous with history across the distant mountain peaks. Beyond the eyes of the French, an army of 20,000 peasants and tribesmen clears the way for the coming soldiers. They labor to open up jungle trails, a human convoy stretching 500 miles from the supply depots at the Chinese border. A veteran of Dien Bien Phu, Colonel Hao Van Lao.
Getting supplies was very difficult because we had to use routes through the jungle. We couldn't use the roads, the large roads, because of the bombings. And then to get 1 kilo of rice to the front at Dien Bien Phu, we had to use 4 kilos for the carrier, because the rice was transported on men's backs by bicycles. We couldn't heat the rice, because any smoke would attract planes.
The French build a chain of fire bases on small hills across the valley. The 7 main strong points are called Claudine, Huguette, Dominique, Eliane, Gabrielle, Beatrice, and Isabel. The communist slogan is everything for the front, everything for victory. There is a new urgency. The great powers have just agreed to meet in Geneva in May 1954 to settle Cold War issues, including Indochina. This means the Viet Minh must achieve a decisive military victory within 5 months.
The Viet Minh
understood that if the French command could be seriously defeated at Dien Bien Phu, this would allow them politically to win the war. Then they decided to put everything into it, to take all the risks, increase their manpower, and accept even greater losses than before. And China granted massive assistance.
Direct Chinese assistance includes 600 Russian-built Molotov trucks, which must defy airstrikes and monsoon rains. The French believe their defenses can contain any attack. French intelligence knows the communists are bringing in heavy guns, but artillery experts underestimate their caliber and accuracy. Late February 1954. 5 months of back-breaking labor has brought the communist armies to the door of Dien Bien Phu. The last 50 miles of mountain road have to be built virtually from scratch. They call the guns steel elephants. They drag 200 heavy guns an inch at a time, half a mile a day through mountains. Colonel Ha Van Lao.
Equipment had to be dragged by rope over men's shoulders. And one time a rope broke, and one of our artillerymen threw himself behind the wheel of this big piece of artillery to stop it from sliding into an abyss. That was the morale of our fighters, who would sacrifice themselves to save a piece of equipment from falling.
Now they can outgun the French in the valley below by more than 3 to 1. Ho Chi Minh issues directives from secret headquarters in safe mountainous jungle. He has one Western visitor, journalist Wilfred Bichette.
He came in with a sun helmet and he turned that upside down on the table, and he just felt around with his hand in the bottom of it and he said, Dien Bien Phu is a valley and it's surrounded by mountains. The cream, the elite troops of the French Expeditionary Corps are down there in that valley, and we're around in the mountains, and they'll never get out.
March 13th, sunset. The battle opens. The communist artillery dramatically reveals its presence, pounding the unsuspecting French on the valley floor below. The first waves of Viet Minh advance on strong point Beatrice, which overlooks the entire French position. The communists launch a whole infantry division against it. Under the heavy shelling, only one French fighter bomber manages to take off. After the first communist losses, there's a pause. Then the attack continues. With the sudden heavy artillery barrage, the French realize they are in a trap. The first day, casualties are heavy. The artillery commander, Colonel Charles Piroth, apologizes to his fellow officers, then commits suicide with a hand grenade. At Outpost Beatrice, so-called suicide platoons breached the barbed wire perimeter. The French repulsed 3 separate assaults. Of the 750 defenders, only 200 survive in the last-minute retreat. By midnight, Beatrice is in Viet Minh hands.
A good day? It starts with a good...
March 15th. 2 more Dien Bien Phu outposts are repeatedly stormed. At heavy cost, the communists occupy half of Hill Gabriel. The French-led troops fall back, then abandon the position. On March 17th, strong point Anne-Marie falls. Now 3 outposts are silenced, but the French estimate communists dead at 2,500. With some hills covered with dead and dying, the Viet Minh pause. French casualties are also high. A hospital plane is stranded, leaving the only Frenchwoman, Nurse Geneviève de Galard.
We were putting the wounded inside the plane to take them back to Hanoi, but the mechanic came back and told us we can't take off because the oil tank has been damaged, severely damaged, and everybody was very upset, especially the wounded, because they thought it was the end of this hell place for them, and it wasn't.
In a bold move to keep the aerial supply line open, the French go on the offensive. They use tanks to attack communist anti-aircraft emplacements on the western hills, flanking the main French forces. Several hundred Viet Minh resist fiercely. The French commit more tanks to the action and break through, led by paratroop commander Lieutenant Colonel Bijard.
It was the first victory of Dien Bien Phu. The Viet Minh were shattered. They wanted to show that they had units capable of fighting. So Colonel de Castries came back and said to me, "Bruno, only you could have pulled this one through." I said, "Yes, Colonel, but operations like this cannot be carried out every day, because I just lost my best officers, both senior and junior. It would be possible if you gave me the men to start all over, but we cannot play this game very long."
The terrible bloodshed now lowers Viet Minh morale. They have only 1 doctor for 50,000 men. General Giap admits to what he calls negative thoughts affecting troop performance. More frontal assaults risk destroying the communist army. Giap decides on a radical change of tactics: underground war. He uses tens of thousands of troops and civilians to dig a 100-mile network of trenches. Soon, the 6-foot-deep trenches reach like tentacles around the low hills in the valley's center. When the trench lines are complete, Giap resumes the offensive. Now his troops are almost face to face with the French. France now urgently seeks U.S. intervention. America is already paying 80% of the war bill, providing giant Globemaster transports to airlift French reinforcements. The French request and get more American arms and fighter planes. But the U.S. wants its major allies to join the aid airlift. Britain refuses, fearing such intervention would escalate the East-West Cold War. America hesitates. As the hours of argument tick by, the Viet Minh guns decimate Dien Bien Phu. It becomes so bad the French cannot even bury their dead. Colonel Bijard.
All the able battalions had come, all the battalions. I kept telling my men, "We must find a formula. We must hold on one more day. The Americans will not let us down. They may come." We felt we needed a day, an extra day. That is why we saw this thing through.
Supplies are dwindling. By late April, the French control only a fraction of the valley center. Almost a third of the French force has been wiped out. The fate of the remaining 10,000 depends on getting ammunition and food, but pilots and troops are helpless as more and more supplies float into communist territory. There are nearly 4,000 wounded. Nurse Gallard, known as the Angel of Dien Bien Phu, is summoned by the senior officers to receive France's highest tribute.
On that night, I was going to the PC of Colonel Lemeunier, and Colonel Langlais was there, and also General de Castres. And when I arrived, they say, "Oh, we are glad to see you, Genevieve. We have something for you." And General de Castres gave me an envelope. When I opened the envelope, I saw a medal, the Legion of Honor.
The Viet Minh trench lines are now just 300 yards from the French command bunker. Even the seriously wounded attempt to fight on.
So some got up, one who had lost an eye, one who had lost an arm. One arm, we called him, said, "We're going back." We saw boys arriving who had lost an arm or an eye, and they were still asking for a weapon to continue fighting. It's indeed remarkable. There was a great spirit. When we went into that shelter where those men were, there was a foul smell, and we could see maggots on legs. And Grovin left them on because he said, "I think it prevents gangrene." So those maggots were moving around on the patient's legs, and it was terrible. So around May 6th, we went to see the men with Langlais, and everyone was exhausted, completely exhausted. We knew we could go no further. There was no more ammunition, and the men could not take it anymore. So when the Viet Minh attacked on May 7th, it was really the end.
May 7th. Finally, the Valley Arena is silent. The Viet Minh victory has cost them an estimated 8,000 dead in the 55-day battle. But French IndoChina is finished. On both sides, history records the battle as extraordinarily heroic. The aftermath, less so. The French are obliged to parade in mass surrender for the communist cameras. 10,000 prisoners start a march into captivity, which only 1 in 2 survive. Colonel Bijard.
Apart from the casualties of Dien Bien Phu, more than half of the survivors of Dien Bien Phu died in captivity. Worn out and abandoned, they lay on the roadside, and we were forbidden to help them. The Viet Minh would leave them to their fate, feeding them a handful of uncooked rice. What could they do? The poor fellows died along the roadside.
They march for up to 60 days to the Red River prison camps 500 miles away. The Viet Minh are without doctors. Those who weaken die where they fall. The Geneva Conference in Indochina begins as Dien Bien Phu falls. Britain, France, Russia, and China sign the accords, but America does not. The agreement partitions Vietnam at the 17th parallel. This border remains for 20 years. Hanoi, October the 11th, 1954. The Viet Minh formally takes control of North Vietnam. Hanoi is a scene of mass ovation for Ho Chi Minh. Ho and his colleagues, in accepting partition, trust in the Geneva provision for joint national elections within 2 years. Ho is confident he will win, but the elections are never held, opposed by Washington and Saigon. A new war will gradually develop. General Bon Win Giap's victory at Dien Bien Phu at age 42 places him among the great generals of modern history. He is credited with building a small peasant force into a sophisticated modern army.
I saw them start out with haphazard weapons, such as hunting guns. And then from month to month, they were able to get organized, to go from small groups to sections, from sections to companies, battalions and brigades, and finally to full divisions. I saw all this, and I can tell you, they became the greatest infantry in the world. These enduring men, capable of covering 50 kilometers in the night on the strength of a bowl of rice and singing their way into battle. In my opinion, they were exceptional infantrymen, and they managed to defeat us. Now, there weren't many of us. We were far from France, but we must admit they also beat the Americans. So they were exceptional, and I really think they certainly are one of the best infantries in the world.
This infantry will become one of the largest in the world. Ho Chi Minh will remain as president until his death 14 years later. General Giap will have military command for 20 years as 5 U.S. presidents become enmeshed in Vietnam.
If I were to pick a time in the whole history of man in which to live and a place